Good evening, and we are back. It is Shardé the Therapist, and I'm so excited to be with you guys today. I have been going on a journey with this series because, as it is near and dear to my heart, recording and all of that is very, very new to me. So I'm not really um, familiar, and I'm adjusting as we go. But I've released 2 episodes. I hope you guys have checked those out. If you have not, we are now on the third, and this one is about Maya. And if you have not caught on to this series is focused on Girlfriends, the show. I would love to play clips in here, but of course, it is a syndicated TV show, and I don't want to get in any trouble for posting any of it here. So we'll talk through the character, and then we're going to talk through perspective therapeutically on what that looks like. I have to tell you guys, I am a recovering people pleaser, if you will. And that's what this episode is really going to be about, people that people please. And Maya was a really interesting character because, on one hand, she portrayed herself to be this very upfront, candid person. But behind all of that, she truly was in this undiscovered space as a girl who essentially stunted developmentally when she got pregnant as a teenager. Then coming forward and getting married. And so her identity turned into this person who just got lost in her roles and not necessarily her personhood. And she portrayed one thing, and underneath all of that appeared to be something else. And I loved Maya because Maya was a friend that we all have, someone who appears to be all the things. And then when you get to the nitty gritty of it all, she just wants to be heard, and she just wants to be seen, and she wants to be accepted, but not really sure how to do that without being the thing that she's consistently shown up as. So it was really interesting to see Maya develop over time and mature, both emotionally and psychologically, as the series went on. I really admired her ability to do so. And then the vulnerability with her divorce and challenges with dating, and even her mother and discovering who she is. I think she was a really, really cool character. So we're going to dip into that. And I'd like to start with this quick story. People pleasing is it's interesting because, on one hand, you want to be able to support people where they are. You want to have compassion and empathy. However, that can easily be taken to the extreme when you do not advocate for yourself, when you do not express yourself, and more importantly, when you do not have boundaries and you allow things to continue. And aren't clear about the reason or purpose. Because again, with anything, we benefit from them. So I'm not going to say having boundaries is a problem. Having boundaries is necessary. And we benefit from when we don't have boundaries or we choose to make them very lax. We also benefit from that as well. And we prioritize which is more important, which is the decisions we make, even when it is difficult. That may be an avoidance of our fear, to avoid feeling abandoned, or whatever that dot, dot, dot comes after that. But it's a really interesting dynamic because we want to be seen as one thing. However, does our behavior and our personhood show up and align as that same thing? I just think that's a really interesting perspective. So Maya, again, as a character, started off as Joan's secretary. So it's this girl who, or young woman rather, who got pregnant in high school, who didn't get to go to college, and she was just trying to be a mother to her son and a wife and raise her child. And she didn't really have a career that she invested in more than she just needed to get a job. She fell into this friend group because Joan was her boss. Now, this is the tricky thing with this. This is already a power dynamic that impacts relationships. If we become cool and we're friends, but you are my supervisor or my boss, there is a power dynamic, whether it is spoken or not, that puts you in a place of trying to appease this person to a certain degree, because part of that is your role. How do I make life easier for this person? How do I make sure this person has what they need in order for me to be able to be sufficient in my job? That's already a power shift. Then when you get into the friendship of it, how do we turn off that you're no longer my supervisor? How do we turn that off? You kind of don't. And it's a really difficult place to be. I never forget when I lived in Louisiana, and when I moved there and got this particular job, it was a lady that I met that I still love to this day. And we were cool for a while. And then she became my supervisor. So it felt awkward. And then she started having to correct me, and again, doing what supervisors do, but for me, made my job very difficult in a lot of ways. Not because she wasn't a good supervisor, just because that was a part of the job. So it really impacted the way we were able to hang out and be cool. And we were so cool before that. But it did impact our relationship because I didn't know how to adjust to this new role she was in when she was just trying to do her job. But a power dynamic existed. There were things we couldn't talk about anymore. I didn't feel comfortable talking about because now you're my supervisor. You're not just hanging out with me in the office anymore. And even with me just trying to stay on her good side, I don't want to get in trouble. I want to make my money and go home. That really does have an impact on your relationships with people when there is a power dynamic at play. Parents or older siblings, or you have a friend that's significantly older or younger than you. There's a power dynamic at play that usually goes unspoken, but it is very clear in the room. So again, with Maya, Joan is her boss. Now Joan is introducing her to her circle of educated women, Tony and Lynn. Lynn, we'll get into in another episode, which I'm really excited about. But these are all educated women. So now Maya is trying to fit in. And her trying to fit in initially created this beef, of course, between her and Tony because she was outspoken in some ways, but it's seemingly not necessarily in the ways that mattered internally, more in the ways of keeping people at bay. Maya would do things like project, especially on insecurities that she had around education or money. But she would also put Tony in her place, which was really interesting because there would be times where she didn't, but it seemed to speak to those inner issues around development, again, that we would see later on when she went out in the world and went to go back to school and was a single mom and like had to develop these skills on her own versus being in a marriage. So I want to get a little bit more into that. And we're going to do a cool Reddit story, which I'm really, really excited about. That is like a whole nother part of this. But we're going to do a quick commercial on my new app, and I hope you enjoy it. Thank you for checking that out. And if you want to get sifted, scan the QR code in the corner. I'm really, really excited. I developed this app myself. I started a completely new mental health and wellness tech company called Rooted One. If you have an opportunity to go to Rooted One, tech.com. I'm really, really, really excited about you guys getting into all the things that I'm into. And again, developing is really an exciting space that I find myself in now. So I have a lot of really cool things coming to you very soon. All right, so we're going to get into the Reddit. Am I the asshole for telling my girlfriend to stop using phrases like a normal person when referring to how I complete tasks? We come from different cultures, but she is always says this. I can be eating. In her culture, she can spend 2 hours finishing a chicken fillet and some rice. For me, that's 30 minutes. She will say this in front of people, and it makes me feel like a pig. Same goes for when we go out to drinks. She will have a glass of wine and take 2 hours to finish it. But by then, I've had three. Drink like a normal person. And the list goes on. I got fed up as I do all the cooking in the house, and she said something about not using enough salt like a normal person. And I told her to learn to cook like a normal person. We are in our 30s and I'm sick of it. I have my own home and a decent career, and don't like having someone coming and devaluing the way I don't do things or I do things for years. I never asked for her criticism, but I get it nonetheless. She has gone so far as to tell me to take an escalator like a normal person. Just stand there is her definition. When I walk up them like stairs to speed up the process and not block those behind me. For some reason, the like a normal person phrase triggers me. It's basically the same thing as saying, "What's wrong with you?" IMO. She doesn't care who it's in front of. I snapped and said, "What exactly is a normal person to you? Someone who behaves exactly like you? That seems to be your parameter." And it was rude. After observation for 2 years of a relationship, this does seem to be her parameter. She is normal. If you deviate from her ways, you are not. Should I have not called her out? She went silent on me for 2 days when we lived together. For reference, we are both in our early 30s to mid 30s. Explaining this stuff to her, how to act with tact, is exhausting. I don't think I was wrong. She never elaborates or gives constructive feedback. It's just act like a normal person. What the F does that mean? Why can't she be descriptive? Is it because she doesn't know what a normal person is? Since everyone has a personality of their own. So to me, this saying is derogatory. I just finally told her to never use that phrasing again unless she can articulate it. Am I the asshole? Ooh, 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 ooh. So I love this specifically because people will often try to use themselves, their behavior, their personality, their ideals, morals, and values as the standard and act as if you deviate from any of that, you are abnormal, you're weird, you're awkward, you're not normal, that whole thing. And I think this again speaks to people pleasing and one of the reasons why people please so much because they just want to be normal. They just want to be connected to other people and they don't want to seem weird or awkward. They don't want to be abandoned or be the odd person out. They want to fit in. And so this idea that there is a standard around normal, obviously that can vary much. I mean, that can vary person to person depending on what their normal is. But in this particular case, I think it's interesting because you have someone that you're in a significant relationship with, and they consistently seem to use a phrase that reminds you that for some reason you are abnormal or what you're doing is abnormal, which sends the message if I am this abnormal, why do you one need to express that to me often if you know this is the way that I do things, or is this your attempt to make me conform? And oftentimes, again, with people pleasing, especially if people do not like conflict, they will just tend to conform or they will secretly start garnering resentment for, well, why are you saying this even though I may do everything I can do to just make you be quiet. I just don't want to hear it. I don't want to seem awkward, even though they may not be awkward at all. Their behavior is just their behavior. It's not hurting anyone. It's not offending anyone. It's not creating any turmoil. It's just the way that they do things. But if you have someone who is overly critical, and wants the other person to conform, this will tend to be the behavior. I am explicitly saying, and not explicitly saying, I want you to conform. My behavior is the norm and yours is not. Again, people pleasers struggle with this because I just want to fit in. I don't want no beef. I don't want no issues. I just want to be cool. And it's not even always about fitting in more than they just don't want no trouble. They don't want to hear it. They don't want to be embarrassed. They don't want to seem like the odd person out in a group of people. And so to put them in a situation where there's this constant phrase of you're not normal or do like normal people also creates a space of discontent and like starting to question, am I really a problem or is it you? And I just, we cannot control everything and everyone. And control is a facade. There are so many things we may think we're controlling, but we're not. And oftentimes when people want to control that much, they have very little control over themselves. They cannot change you, change them, so they choose to change you, at least. Um, but I want to talk a little bit about how getting self-worth being needed versus being valued is really important. Those are two different things. A lot of times I find that people will build their value based on being needed. I get myself in a situation with a partner who requires a caretaker. That's the way that they need me. But I'm not necessarily valued. I just serve in this particular role for them, which is valued and needed, not necessarily me being valued as a human being. How, I also, easy telltales when you ask someone, well, why do you like them? Or what do you love about them? And they start to describe, well, they make me laugh, or they show up for me in ways nobody does. They're not describing what they like about that particular person. They're just they value the reasons that they're needed and the value they have for them, not necessarily the reasons this person is valuable all on their own, or why they like them all on their own. I hope y'all understand those are two different things. If the only ways I can describe you is, oh, she makes me laugh, or oh, we have such a good time together, she really stands up for me, and yeah, that's not you knowing anything about me other than what you like about what I do for you and what I make you feel when we're in an engagement or relationship together, versus being valued independent of how you're needed. I like Shardé. She is funny. I like Shardé. She is the epitome of intelligent. She is a cool person. I like the way she laughs. Those are individual descriptors of me as a person, not me in a role or function for you. Those are two different things. And people pleasers typically attract people who take, because they're willing to give, and they're willing to give even through resentment, even at sacrificing themselves. They're willing to give at all costs because their value is tied to being needed or desired, not necessarily to just understanding their value and finding the people who get that and want that outside of them being needed for something. And it is quite an exhausting cycle. Imagine if you are this person constantly being in the role of being needed by someone, and the only way you believe that you're valuable in that relationship is to constantly be needed. So when can you say no? Hey, can I watch your kids? Hey, can you, and you're saying yes to things you can't even afford to say yes to, because you've already exhausted your capacity. But because you don't feel confident enough to say no, you create a relationship where people will take even when your intention is to be given. But because you don't make it a standard, and you're attempting to people please your way through hoping somebody's going to get it and give the way that you're modeling to give, that's not the way it works. People who want to give will give if that's who they are. But if you train them to do otherwise, just know they're going to do otherwise. If you act as if you don't need anything, again, you're so busy trying to please me, you're not pleasing yourself, and you're not even putting me in a position to please you, because we have to focus on what I need and what I want. You're not going to get what you want. And that idea that hopefully people will come around, they don't. Unfortunately, they just don't. So I would say, not for nothing, the first step is being thoughtful about what your wants or needs are and how you are valuable in relationships outside of being needed, because you are a person, and people value you outside of being needed, even if that's not always articulated. But you have to know what that looks like first. So I hope that this was helpful. Check out my books. Make sure you like and subscribe, because I'll have the next episode coming out very, very soon. I try to keep these short and potent, and I hope you enjoy today. I'll see you soon. Bye-bye.